At one time, Medellín was the capital of Colombia's drug cartels. Here, the farther down the social ladder you go, the higher you climb. Comuna 13, one of its poorest areas, stretches across the hills overlooking the city. In 2002, Comuna 13 was the scene of a tragedy that made the world news headlines. The army was sent in to take the area back from the guerrilla units and drug gangs. Hundreds of innocent bystanders died in the violence that followed. Now a vibrant music scene has taken shape here. Many of the groups are into hip-hop, such as Synagoga Crew.
There's a lot of violence. It's always there, right under the surface. There are lots of rebel groups, armed political groups who've been recruiting young people, and this exerts a big influence on the music, because these youngsters say they either have to join a group making revolution through politics or through music.
The Colombian government is now actively supporting neighborhood projects, concerts for instance, or practice rooms and CDs. A 15-year-old boy was shot to death in the neighborhood recently. No one knows why. Most of the young people here have no job, education or training.
What we sing about are the stories we experience in the barrios. Day-to-day things like when a young man gets beaten up or shot at, and the confrontations that happen. Our songs are a public denunciation of what's going on.
Their music is a kind of gentle revolution of its own.
It's a direct response, meant just as much for the teenagers as for the younger kids or the dropouts. So they can see there are other options out there than to reach for a gun.
The murder capital, the drug cartel capital. It's hard to imagine a town with a worse reputation than Medellín. But it's taking action to move beyond this now stereotyped image and join the nation in seeking a way to break out of the downward spiral of civil and drug wars and invest in its greatest resource, its people. Like Rio de Janeiro, Medellín has its metro cable cars, a service for the people of the surrounding poor neighborhoods, who would otherwise have to walk for hours to reach the city center on foot. On the heights overlooking the city is La Aurora, the light of dawn, an optimistic name for one of Medellín's social housing projects. A few years ago, Cristina and Francisco traded in their guns as guerrillas in the FARC, the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia, for a new life and a 30-square-meter flat.
This is the kitchen. It's not finished yet. We're still going to do something with the walls. And this is where we keep our clothes and where we do the laundry. And here's our bedroom. As I was telling you, the space is very limited because it's our living and our workspace both.
The government's reintegration program is showing results. The same government many of the program's beneficiaries once fought in any and every way they could.
My father and little brother were victims of torture. The soldiers tied them up and tortured them because they said they were collaborators. But in fact, my father was only a peasant who ran a shop and sold us things we needed, whether you call us guerrillas, paramilitary, or an army, which we were.
Cristina met her husband while serving with the FARC. Francisco was seriously injured by a landmine he had laid himself.
None of the government soldiers had stepped on it, so we were going to take it out and lay it somewhere else. They're powered by batteries, and unfortunately, it fell in some water and exploded. I lost my hand in the accident. and my sight and some of my teeth.
Comrades in arms stole the money he needed for an emergency operation. Now Cristina and Francisco are disillusioned. The guerrillas have turned into criminal gangs, dealing drugs, kidnapping and killing indiscriminately. They want to quit the FARC once and for all, but the guerrillas' first rule is, till death do us part.
We were on the run from the FARC, from the army, from everyone. We were living in fear all the time. I had lost all faith in the FARC, but I had much less faith in the state. I'd heard about the reintegration program, but I didn't believe it. I thought it was just a trick to extract information from people.
It was the only chance they had left. Cristina took the chance in the hope that they could start a new life.
No matter how often I fall, I always find the strength to pick myself up again. I keep my goals in sight. I don't get enough sleep, but I have to find the strength to fight for my goals.
Cartagena is both a tourist's honeypot and a cultural and historical melting pot. Luxury high-rise apartment buildings are sprouting all along the Caribbean coast, while the nearly half-century-old city centre is a UNESCO World Cultural Heritage Site. The history of Cartagena's wealth and power, of the slave trade, violence and the war for independence is written in its stones. And here we meet the man who for nearly 50 years has brought it alive for the tourists through countless little anecdotes.
One time a gentleman came to me with his grandson and said, "Dear sir, please find some corn for me anywhere you can. My grandson wants to feed the pigeons." I said, "Very well, sir," and ran and bought a kilo of corn and turned around and sold it to him for 500 pesos. And I told myself, starting tomorrow, I'm going to buy corn and sell it to people who want to throw it at the statues, just to do something nice with the pigeons. Then both the pigeons and I will have something nice to eat.
Here the majority is of African descent. Most of the population live in the neighbourhoods surrounding the old town. Many poor families of the La Candelaria neighbourhood have got caught in the crossfire between the army and paramilitary and guerrilla groups. Padre Roberto Rodriguez knows the area well.
There's no sewer system. The wastewater just runs down the streets. This has caused lots of illnesses among the children here. The city government never pays any attention to these neighborhoods. They only come here to campaign for an election, but otherwise never.
With support from the German Catholic Miserior International and other development organizations, Padre Roberto can help large families. Rosa Alvarez has lived here for 30 years and seems resigned to the prospect of being here forever.
Our situation is bad, really bad, because you have to fight for every little scrap of food and struggle to pay the utilities, which are really expensive. Sometimes they'll turn the water or the lights off because we haven't kept up with the bills.
Rosa has 7 children. She keeps pigs and grows vegetables.
Sometimes the kids manage to sell a little something at the market or on the street, and sometimes they come back empty-handed. We have to struggle to get through each day, and sometimes we don't have anything to eat at all.
Until a few years ago, Colombia's highland regions were a battleground. Now they're open to travellers again. The only way to reach Santa Cruz de Mompos is by ferry across the Rio Magdalena. It's a journey up the river of time, in more ways than one, historic and nostalgic. The town's few cars are backed up on the high street, waiting for a parade to pass of little beauty queens. During the colonial era, Mompos enjoyed a measure of strategic and economic importance. Afterwards, it gradually sank into a long, deep slumber. Standard for every Latin American town and city is the statue of El Libertador, Simón Bolívar. Javier Cardenas owns and operates Mompos's principal bakery, La Central.
At the risk of exaggerating, I'm extremely proud of it because it's a family business. My father started it 26 years ago. I'm his youngest and now I'm running it. That was my father's last wish, so I'm very, very proud of it.
In the daily drudge of kneading dough and mixing batter, does he ever miss the big city?
I wouldn't trade Mompos for the city. The tranquility of a town like Mompos is unique, and the sense of security too. You don't have to worry about being attacked when you go out with your friends for a stroll, or to have a drink late at night. Mompos is a paradise.
In Mompos, life is a river, a long, placid one. Exploring the Rio Magdalena's many tributaries, it's easy to forget Colombia's many problems. San Antonio, Venezuela. What little traffic there is between Colombia and its neighbour keeps flowing, just as long as there haven't been any threats or rumours of war.
We're all brothers, 5 brothers. Colombia, Venezuela, Bolivia, Ecuador, and Peru.
But the governments have another view of brotherhood.
You know, like Cain and Abel.
This road played a role in history. Nearly 200 years ago, Latin America's liberator, Simón Bolívar, crossed the Andes here on his way to Caracas, the city of his birth, and to his victory over the Spanish imperial rulers. Today, a modern highway snakes through the mountain range to Caracas. The Venezuelan capital is a jungle, a concrete jungle. It has one of the world's highest murder rates. Here, just as in Rio de Janeiro and Cartagena, the poor neighbourhoods spread up and across the hills around the city centre. German photographer Holger Stock is intimately acquainted with this area's history. The dictator Pérez Jiménez had a settlement built here in the 1950s.
At the time, he said literally, if there is no controlled construction of new buildings in Venezuela's barrios, they'll spread like a cancer. And he acted accordingly and had all these blocks of flats built that you see here.
Ironically, the neighborhood is named after the day General Pérez was toppled, January the 23rd, 1958. This is where the resistance movement first took shape. Holger Storck has arranged to meet with the student José Delgado and the official Santiago Arconada, both supporters of President Hugo Chávez, who has launched what he calls the Revolución Bolivariana and the socialism of the 21st century. And he styles himself the legitimate heir to Simón Bolívar's legacy.
I believe in socialism because it takes a social approach to solving problems. And people here have enough of a sense of community to solve their problems themselves. I believe this is the way to create a better way of life, a better quality of life for humankind.
Many here are Chavistas or supporters of Chávez. They see the same hope for a better future. Las más bellas escogí de colores. Una canción que aprendí.
I think it's the most significant political victory in 10 years. After such a long period of domination, we're committed to the path of liberation. Now the masses have joined us, and I think they're convinced. There's no turning back.
That's precisely what the opposition is afraid of. The president speaks to the people every week on TV, and at the same time he's closing down radio and television stations. The TV news channel Globovisión, too, has come under official fire. Journalist Lisbeth Ramos can well understand Hugo Chávez's initial popularity.
I think he's paid lots of attention to certain segments of the population in a way that was directed more at the media than at achieving results. Because the level of poverty really doesn't reflect any of the economic growth we've had from our oil revenues, which have been considerable. But you don't see any of it hitting the streets.
The government lays the blame squarely on the opposition's doorstep.
This was a public event where the president was also present. There's a growing fear among the population. Some people would rather not say anything at all. Or if they do, it's off the record.
We had an appointment with the mayor of Caracas. He's been avoiding the city hall ever since it was attacked by a paramilitary group in the name of the revolution. In 2009, Chávez's party lost the election for the mayor's office. Mayor Antonio Ledesma is a qualified lawyer. He made international headlines when he went on a hunger strike to protest Chávez's cuts to his budget as well as his official powers. The confrontation is escalating.
He maintains relations with Iran, Belarus, Libya, Algeria, and Cuba. And he has no qualms about declaring publicly that he's a student of and a soldier for Fidel Castro. All the president's going to achieve is to bind Venezuela and the Venezuelans to political and ideological corpses and the old men who embody them.
Social Democrat Antonio Ledesma says his only chance is to reach the people, and he hits hard.
You might find this hard to believe, but whenever I receive a communication from the chief of the capital city police, he always signs off at the bottom with fatherland, socialism, or death.
Before Chávez, Venezuela was a hotbed of capitalism, a Latin American land of unlimited opportunity. Venezuela has also produced more than its share of beauty queens and top models, the ideal place for the globe-trotting Holger Storck to make his name as a top photographer. Now, together with Andreina Villasmil, he's in search of another kind of beauty. How does his work here differ from what he's used to in Germany?
You have to be much more sensitive. Most of these women are very, very anxious, and some of them have had very, very bad experiences in this society.
At first it was difficult. It was tough. There even came a moment when I didn't want to go outside. I didn't want anyone to see me. You can't cover this up.
La Otra Belleza, a different beauty, is a PR campaign by the Fundación Limón.
We want an aesthetic ideal that's something other than truth. Beauty is something integral. That's what we're looking for in a different beauty. We're trying to bring out those qualities in each person who takes part. We want them to show us what else is there in their hearts.
When driving through Venezuela, one thing is hard to miss. Oil and fuel are cheaper here than drinking water. The Orinoco Delta, a 40,000 square kilometre maze of canals and tributaries. Here, far away from modern civilization, live a people who have preserved their traditional way of life into the present day, the Warao natives. These families have no electricity for their homes and no school for their children. The Warao still speak their own language and don't know Spanish, except for Victor, who learned it working odd jobs.
We're happy here, but we need money. We have nothing, nothing at all. There's no doctor here, nothing.
Aquí no tiene médico nada.
The nearest clinic is many days' journey away, and the only way to get there is by canoe. Victor's family lives only 100 meters from here. Warao society is matrilineal. The woman is generally the head of the household, and the birth of a daughter is esteemed more highly than the birth of a son. What little Victor's family has belongs to his mother. No one speaks Spanish here either, so Victor interprets.
She was born here.
Not even the Warao are entirely innocent of civilization.
Yes, we have a television here. It works, but there's no electricity.
Victor doesn't seem to miss it. Other things are harder for outsiders to get used to. The Warao eat moriche worms as a delicacy. Raw.
That's Warao.
It was exactly what we'd feared. But really, where's the problem? They're high in protein and low in calories, fat and cholesterol.
Want to try one? They're delicious.
The Warao are peace-loving, humorous and witty people. In spite of their poverty and hard life, they live in harmony with nature. But oil drilling and the people who come with it do not, and the Orinoco Delta may soon be up for exploration. In the next part of our series, we move on to Panama.